it still doesn't negate the reality that their physical behavior was completely unnecessary. How they acted towards Calais Campbell and Jonnu Smith, his teammates, was completely unnecessary. Even though they didn't identify themselves as his teammates, they identified themselves as his friend. It was all unnecessary. It was all beyond the pale. It was all completely unnecessary, and in one officer's case, it was definitely excessive. But what we're talking about is the importance of black men being able to go home, being able to avoid putting themselves in a position where you can have a rogue police officer whose ego might be a bit compromised, who has a temper tantrum because they're dealing with whatever it is that they're dealing with, and they may be taking it out on a patron or somebody, just a regular citizen. We understand what the dilemma is. So what I'm saying is, when Tyreek Hill looks into the cameras and he says, I did nothing wrong, are you saying that you would do exactly what you did and you would encourage everyone else to do exactly what you did? I would challenge that.
Americans is a perma-cuck, bro. That's it.
He's handcuffed.
All right, bro, take me to jail, bro. Do it.
Two of Hill's teammates pulled up to the scene.
All right, we already we know what the situation is, but here, let's hear.
Released in time for the team's matchup against the Jacksonville Jaguars.
There was a lack of cooperation from Mr. Hill.
Rodney Harrison, a former police commissioner on Long Island, believes officers acted fairly.
It unfortunately led to a point where
if you're wondering why media is like perma-cucked, or if you're wondering why your fellow citizens don't understand that like this kind of behavior is completely irrational, look no further than CBS Mornings' accurate, fair, and balanced reporting on the subject matter. Now imagine. Remember what you said? Oh, is this like because they're Cuban and he's black or whatever? Like, remember that. That's a black man. That's deliberate, okay? They put a black man there to specifically say these words to defend the cops.
Unfortunately led to a point where he had to be pulled out of the vehicle, handcuffed, and put on the sidewalk while a lot of different vehicles were driving by, and probably turned to a little bit of an embarrassment moment for him.
Hill recounted that moment in a CNN interview Monday night.
I wasn't moving fast because, I got injuries. You feel me? I got things that I go through. I guess the officers, they felt like I wasn't doing it on their timing, but I was doing it. But, man, I'm still kind of shell-shocked from it, man. Like, yeah. I'm embarrassed.
For CBS Mornings, I'm Jerika Duncan.
It seems like it escalated so fast. And oftentimes we talk about these situations happening, and the question that I keep asking myself is, why isn't there better de-escalating tactics that these officers can use? Because it can spill over into something deadly, as we've seen before.
I don't know. I look at that tape, and I wish they both would have handled it differently, to be honest with you. I think that when the officer, he first said to the officer, don't knock on my window, which instantly sets him off. He rolls up the window, which also sets him off, when really they both could have handled it differently. But the officer is supposed to be the professional and should figure out a way to de-escalate the situation. But I look at that tape, I feel very differently.
God, I fucking hate mainstream media so much, bro. This is why, chap.
Now to the Middle East, because
if you're wondering how people develop this kind of like insane, completely irrational behavior, how they get to this fucking point, it's because you literally have people saying shit like this. And that's supposed to be like mainstream media. That's supposed to be like the objective news coverage and commentary on the matter. It's ridiculous, dude. You have to look at the action and you have to look at the reaction, okay? Look at the action, look at the reaction. The responsibility is on the hands of the party that is the public servant, okay? That literally can take your life away in any given moment. Like, that bar is supposed to be so fucking high. Like, these people that have unimaginable power, unchecked power, should not be wielding that shit willy-nilly. Like, that's crazy. But yes, mainstream media is constantly creating permission structures within which police can act with impunity. And that is precisely the reason why so many people that you fucking know will then repeat that shit without even thinking about it, without thinking about like what that means. Okay, what that spells for them, what kind of like power structure they are defending. Friend of the show, Dan Levitard, this is what he said.
You guys, though, is legitimately, are you allowed to be surprised by this? Because it feels like if you're surprised by this video, you have not been paying attention at all to what's been happening in America as we head to another voting cycle. Like, I really asked the question sincerely. Are you allowed? Like, hey, white people, like they ran Kaepernick, they ran him out of the league, like for saying, hey, white people. Like, I don't know how surprised you're allowed to be by this video, because Rodney King was a long time ago. Like the lessons of Rodney King. What is that? Is that late 80s?
I think so. Yeah, early 90s. We should also outline, it's not just white people, it's law enforcement officials. There's a prejudice with law enforcement officials. In this video, from what we can tell, mostly Hispanic police officers. There's a huge issue with policing in this country. There's a huge issue with policing in Miami-Dade County. And I'm hopeful this will bring about change.
It won't. Because they're cops. That's the higher priority. When you're a cop, like your own personal background, your ethnic background, like that is entirely irrelevant to the subject matter. You know what I mean? You're a cop. That's it. That's what you are in that situation. You're behaving in a cop-like way. Isn't it important that if some random black dude, he could have died? Black people tell their children not to be subservient because it's the reality. You can get shot for having an attitude, not because they like the cops. Yeah. But if we're analyzing the situation, if we're looking at the situation from the perspective of like what's right and what's wrong, I'm never going to fucking victim blame. Okay? That person is a victim of police brutality. Okay? That's what it is. I'm not going to sit here and fucking victim blame. Here's Bomani Jones. I love Bomani Jones.
Sunday, kind of minding my own business, getting back into swing of things.
This is the last thing I'm going to talk about before we get to Israel and some other shit. I got to go. Hold on 1 second.
Cops was messing with Tyreek Hill. Didn't really know. Somebody just told me that the cops was messing with Tyreek Hill. I ran a search. The next thing I know, Tyreek Hill is on his back, on the ground, handcuffed, and the cops is standing over him. Now, when you start talking about Tyreek Hill and the cops being involved, that's one of those where you walk up and you need to be like, hold on. Somebody take me back to the very beginning, right? Like, there's no telling exactly how we wound up here, except it's his Lamborghini is down the street from the stadium, and now he's face down on the ground, handcuffed, and it didn't pass the smell test. What wound up happening there? Then Calais Campbell, who one of the largest humans in the history of humanness. He shows up because he sees his man's getting messed with by the cops, and he comes in and is trying to get some answers, trying to defuse the situation. He winds up being in handcuffs. And then eventually all parties involved were taken out of their handcuffs, and then they went to the game, and then they played in the game, and then the Dolphins won the game, and Tyreek Hill scored a touchdown. And when Tyreek Hill scored the touchdown, he did a thing where he acted like he was handcuffed, and he had somebody come unhandcuff him, which, I mean, I guess you have to do something, I suppose. Like, I don't know. Look, man, I don't know what to tell that man to do after that situation under those circumstances or whatever it was, right? Like, I don't know what exactly there is to say. There was a couple of interesting things that came out of it. One, Sean, do we have this Tyreek talking before the media after the game, kind of giving his side of what went down with the cops?
Right now, you know, so I've been trying to figure that out too. Man. Right now, I'm still trying to put it all together. So I'm not gonna give you a version that I still don't know what happened. You know what I'm saying? But I do want to be able to use this platform to say, like, what if I wasn't Tyreek Hill, bro? Like, Worst case scenario, you know, because it's crazy. Like, I want to be a cop one day. I got a state trooper hat, all that, you know, so I got a lot of respect.
Stop right there. Did he just say he want to be a cop?
And he has his state trooper's like certification or something.
Hey. He said he got a hat. He said he got a state trooper hat. He got this motherfucker looking like Smokey the Bear, talking about he want to be a cop. And like, I saw Cocaine Cowboys. I know that back in the day in Miami, it could be very easy for you to be a police officer. But Sean, I'm going to just throw it out there, brother. I don't think Tyreek Hill could pass the background check.
You know, I think Shaq as a cop makes somewhat sense, but Tyreek Hill, I don't see it lining up.
Yeah, I don't. I just don't think. I think that once they start asking some questions, it becomes a little difficult for them. Yeah, okay. So that is what he said. Now we have a clip from Javon Holland, and I always, before we get to Javon's clip, I always say this. I talked to Javon in 2020 when I was doing a story about the united movements of college athletes. You know, the Pac-12 United, all that stuff that was going on where they were trying to unionize in some form or fashion and get what they was looking for. And I can't tell you how impressed I was by this dude when he was 21 years old, or however old he was then. I was like kind of blown away by how impressive he was. But anyway, this is what he had to say after the game.
Before the game. Yeah, that was crazy. I was stretching and I seen on the TV, bro got arrested. And then I seen the clip, cop like kicked him or something like that. It was crazy. So that's got to get handled. You know what I'm saying? Excessive force on a black man, that's not uncommon. It's a very common thing in America. So I think that needs to be addressed at a countrywide level. So yeah, I don't think that shit is cool at all. But you know, it's not unnatural or not uncommon for cops to do that type of shit, especially the black man. So that needs to be addressed for sure.
You know, and I appreciated him making that point as directly as he made that point. This is also where you remind everybody kind of the contradiction of, remember Stephen Ross? Stephen Ross was the one that was really trying to get them boys to stop kneeling, their owner. And Stephen Ross is definitely on the Trump team. That's his ball game. But he also runs this this organization called Rise that's supposed to be like helping cut down on the racism in sports, you know? And I heard what Holland had to say right there. And it just wanted me to get back up and ask the question, hey, do you remember when we used to care about the police beating people up and killing them? You remember that? Because it used to be like a really big thing. Like it dawned on me. August 9th.
Bro, did you hear he wants to be a cop? Wait, who? Tyreek Hill said he wants to be a cop? I mean, that tracks with his background. That tracks with his priors. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say on the matter. I don't want to come across like I'm fucking victim blaming in this circumstance. But you know, not exactly surprising.
9th of this year was the 10th anniversary of Mike Brown being killed in Ferguson, Missouri. So like yesterday is 10 years and 30 days away from that moment. And we've had the Kaepernick situation that went on in between and everything else. But from the way that we are acting about this, because I find that by and large, the way that I've seen the commentary about this in sports media go had a lot more to do with football than anything else. Like it was almost treated in that uncomfortable way that you would treat it when Kobe Bryant would go to court and then come back and score 35, right? Like it became almost like part of the narrative of the sports stuff. But let me tell you something. Calais Campbell, by my estimation, risked his life to go inquire what was going on there. And you know why I say he risked his life to go inquire what was going on there? Because that dude is 6'8" and 300 and something pounds. And my first thought would be when Snuffleupagus gets rolled up, today was going to lay his big ass down. Like that was my number one thought there. That is would be terrifying. That big dude, that's terrified. And he come over there with that voice, hey, what's going on over here? Like I was scared to death. And hearing that something could easily wind up happening to him, because those are what the stakes are. And we had all these discussions about what the stakes were. And we had all this talk for all this time about police violence, generally and specifically against black people. But we had all this talk about this. And It is my understanding that the numbers around those things are roughly the same. They're roughly the same. We had George Floyd died 4 years ago, and that incident, which took place around, it was a little, I want to say it was, what was that, May, and then Jacob Blake was in August. But anyway, we had the George Floyd situation in 2020, which was largely, I mean, it was clearly about police brutality, but as many people have documented and discussed in the aftermath, that the concessions that people managed to receive in the midst of all that outrage in 2020, it wasn't about police brutality. It was about things that happened and went down at your middle class office. You know? So I get back to the question, do we still care about the police roughing people up? And if we do still care about police roughing people up, like, what are we supposed to do at this point? Because what seemed to happen was people just kind of ran out of energy. A lot of people ran out of energy, and this big one that you can't lose sight of, a lot of the more visible people at the front of this came into a lot of money. There's no way around that. But I really stopped, like, as this happened, and it made me stop and think back to 10 years ago, what a major thing something like this would have been, and how the sports media at that time was very well equipped to have people get on television and get on everything else and talk about what went on. And we were talking about it in these sorts of macro levels. Now, I think a few things happened. One, I think especially after COVID, people's capacity for outrage and their energy for it is a lot lower, and they don't really have it in them to dial it up and be charged up, at least not about things that matter. You can definitely get charged up about the bullshit topic du jour on the internet. I definitely see that people have the energy to do that one. I don't think they have the energy really to get invested into things that, like, really matter anymore. But it was hard to ignore the difference in the way that we would treat such a thing. And this, again, this is a Hall of Fame football player being stopped on the way to a game. Maybe it'd be.
By the way, this is something I've talked about quite a bit with, like, other members of the media when they interview me and stuff. And I think for a lot of young people during COVID, they had the energy, they had the momentum, and they saw nothing. Mass demonstrations stopped dead in their fucking tracks with no concessions made for the reasonable demands. And they were put in the crosshairs as though they were spoilers for the election. And I think after that, they were like, all right, I'm totally checked out of the political process. I did everything right. I voted. I protested. I voted. Nothing happened. I don't even think it's like I can now go back to not paying attention to shit. I think it's more so for a lot of people who went out to those protests. They were like, their expectation was that, like, the needle would move in this direction, in this reasonable fucking direction. And in this duopoly, our politicians on the liberal side straight up fucking said, our politicians on the liberal side turned around and fucking said, no, you are the real enemy. These defund the police protesters. They are the real problem, not the police. So why the fuck should anybody ever do anything?
Treated differently, and we'd look at it differently if it had been something that stopped him from actually being able to compete. I'm not sure. Maybe we'd go about it a little bit different if the person getting hemmed up by the cops was a little bit more of a sympathetic figure. I think that all those things maybe go into it, but I think it is hard to look at this and not stop and look back and be like, we kind of gave up. We did. Even with the Kaepernick discussion, after a point, the Kaepernick discussion stopped being about police brutality and became about Colin getting his job back, which really wasn't the point ever in this, right? So I'm not saying this with but so much judgment, because I'm not out here talking about the cops and what they're doing in the ways that I did at that time either, right? I feel like I kind of read the room and realized that I wasn't going to be heard anymore, that the capacity to do it was gone. So I could understand lots of reasons that lots of people would have dialed it back if they so decided. But I think we need to really get engaged.
The Democratic Party said the only vote forward is the guy who wrote the crime bill and his vice president, who used to be a fucking cop. After mass protests all around the planet, not just in the United States of America, everywhere else. How the fuck do you expect people to turn around and be like, well, I still have hope in this system? You did everything right. You did everything right. And what did you get? What do you have to show for it? Nothing. Maybe criminal record, as a matter of fact. If you got arrested at any of these fucking protests.
In a certain measure of introspection about a lot of this, man. Like what it is that we care about, what it is that we don't care about, and how we just kind of stopped caring about this. How somehow this stopped being a thing that was worth our collective time and energy. Because it's all still going down. They still messing with us. They still jamming us up. They still doing all of the things. We're just not as mad about it anymore. What's up with that? The NFL is back, which means you could turn $10 into $1,000 in a single game watching your...
Oh, my God. Damn it, Bomani Jones. Why you got to do that to me?